Okay, lots of ground to cover, no time to get all flowery with the intro. If you clicked this, you know what you're in for here. Lots of crazy shit went down in Avengers Endgame that seems to change the math for several big movies and streaming projects that were already announced for the Marvel Cinematic Universe going forward, and in general, people now have questions. So let's do this once again. Iron Man and Black Widow are dead, Thanos and his whole army are dead, all the snapped people came back to life, but Vision didn't because he died before the snap. Gamora is back, but it's a different Gamora from an alternate timeline, who never joined the Guardians, and doesn't know Quill. Pepper Potts got her own suit of armor, we don't know if she's called Rescue, Iron Maiden, Iron Woman, or something else, and she and Tony had a 5-year-old daughter named Morgan. Thor made Valkyrie the new Queen of Asgard, which may or may not be permanently relocated to Earth, and decided to join up, or maybe just hitch a temporary ride with the Guardians back to space. Bruce Banner and the Hulk are now merged into a single identity, so he's always got the giant Hulk body, but Banner's brain, speech, and mannerisms, and Captain America is now an actual old guy because he went back in time to marry Agent Carter, then reconnected with his buddies in the present to pass the shield to the Falcon, apparently making him the heir apparent to be the new Captain America. Oh, and hey, 90% of the movie took place in the near future 2025, which, hey, hooray for the optimism and assuming there's going to be a 2025, but also I guess that means Spider-Man Far From Home will also take place in the near future, but the rest of the upcoming projects, well, that's kind of a question now for a few of these, right? Let's start with the obvious one. Hawkeye is getting his own spin-off series on the Disney Plus streaming service. He survived, so it could easily take place after Endgame, but it could just as easily take place in the 5-year gap between that and Infinity War, when we're told he's on the run as a notorious high body count vigilante, and not even the other Avengers have been able to catch him. As an Easter egg for comic fans, he's been using the costume and ninja weapons from his Ronin period. It would not surprise me at all if that's what the series ends up focusing on, and maybe we'll even see Adrian Palicki come back as Mockingbird again. Speaking of that, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is supposed to be back. Holy shit, next week actually, with an abbreviated 6th season. The already greenlit Season 7 will apparently be its last. Season 5 was acknowledged to be taking place just before the shit hit the fan in Infinity War, whereas Season 6 will apparently take place just after a 1-year time jump, meaning this might be our first extended view of what the post-snap MCU looked like on the ground level. More unclear still is the fate of Jessica Jones Season 3, the last of the now officially scuttled Marvel-Netflix collaborations, which was completed before cancellation but hasn't aired yet. Technically, the Netflix series were part of the MCU but reference the connection less openly than S.H.I.E.L.D. does, and thus far all of the produced seasons of each series had explicitly been set prior to Infinity War. It's unclear if that mandate will remain for this last season of Jones. Also, Netflix's lawyers have clarified that Disney and Marvel can't develop any new projects using the Defenders adjacent characters for several years without buying back their share of the rights. But okay, back to the bigger guns. Also en route to Disney Plus is supposedly The Falcon and Winter Soldier, which as far as we know is still the title. However, if you saw Endgame, and if not, why are you watching this, you know that the next to last scene implies that Sam Wilson has effectively been christened the new Captain America by Steve Rogers, S.H.I.E.L.D. and all. Both he and Bucky Barnes have carried the mantle in the comics, of course. So then, are we waiting on a title change for this, or something else? Unlike Hawkeye, this one can't be set pre-Endgame and post-Infinity War because Bucky and Sam were both among the snapped. It was also a little confusing last week or so, back when we found out that the Disney Plus Vision and Scarlet Witch series is actually going to be called WandaVision, and at least according to a quote from Elizabeth Olsen, would be set in the 1950s or something along those lines. There's been no clarifications, but now that we know Vision is apparently gone for real, I've got a hunch we'll be getting a reality-bending dream world kind of show with this one. See, the movies don't really try to explain it all that well, and it's never really made that much sense, but part of Scarlet Witch's power set in the comics is basically rewriting reality itself by affecting probability or something. Look, it's confusing as hell, but she's absurdly overpowered, and sometimes, like in House of M, she can just kind of make whole other realities if she wants to. So I wonder if the premise here involves her conjuring some kind of simulation where Vision is back or alive, and as for the 1950s setting, maybe they're going to borrow some of the retro David Lynchian family sitcom edge from the bizarre recent Vision comic where he built himself a whole robot family and tried to be normal in the suburbs. I could see that. Plus, the teenage girl daughter Viv from that series has become a Marvel character they've really pushed to the forefront of the comics, so maybe that's where they're heading. I also wonder if there's a question about how the Loki streaming series, which we've heard was supposed to be a weird anthology about Loki showing up and causing trouble at different points in history because he can't do anything new because he's, dead. But during the time travel part of Endgame, when they're back in 2012 during the end of the first Avengers movie, Loki accidentally gets home with the Tesseract and teleports away, implying that he's somewhere loose now, at least in that timeline. That can't change history in the main storyline, of course, because Endgame uses the theory of time travel where you can't change the future, you just create branching timelines into alternate realities, so unless Captain America is going to fix that change as well, we'll get to his whole thing. Were they just being coy this whole time, and that alternate Loki will be the one starring in a series and or returning to the main universe? We don't know, but speaking of Asgardians, wow, there's lack of subtlety, and there's Thor literally handing Valkyrie an entire kingdom to get Tessa Thompson to stick around and make more Marvel movies. So either she's getting a movie, or they're giving serious consideration to the equally unsubtle please make this your social media banner scene where all the female heroes lined up at once in the final battle, and that already felt pretty much like a real-time audience poll for should this be a movie. Or maybe both. And also, while it's a fun gag, I'm now curious to know if Thor is actually going to be a full-on supporting character in Guardians 3, and if so, if that was always the plan or if that's new. Either way, curious to see how that plays out now that there's this unexpected new wrinkle with Gamora, yet not Gamora, in the Guardians franchise proper. Here's a question. Will we ever see Pepper Potts again? Seems like sort of a waste to have a whole new Iron Person going to waste, but supposedly Gwyneth Paltrow is done with the superhero game for a while, so maybe not. I also wonder what the plan is for the Hulk, since an all-CGI all-the-time version means Mark Ruffalo can theoretically keep doing the role without worrying about age or staying in movie star shape. Supposedly Marvel hasn't really bothered to reacquire the solo Hulk movie rights from Universal yet, which is why they haven't done another one, but man, I really want him to do Grey Hulk at some point. Like, you think Ruffalo knows that sometimes Banner turns into a version of the Hulk who's just a total prick and hangs out in Las Vegas and gambles and wears Hulk-sized fancy suits and does mob stuff and gets laid all the time? I mean, how could you not want that to be a movie? That sounds amazing. But okay, now the big hey, wait a minute, right? Black Widow is finally getting her own movie after this, but now she's dead. Like, all the way dead, not coming back, apparently. On the one hand, we know that the whole thing about it maybe being a prequel probably has to be true now. On the other hand, what does that mean? Like, where do you go with that? We already know her story and where it ends up, and just finding out what Budapest refers to isn't going to cut it for a movie. Well, I suspect there's more to the story. See, there's a second lead female role in the film that they've been casting very aggressively for that Florence Pugh from Fighting With My Family just recently landed. Now, this is supposedly a hugely sought-after part that every vaguely appropriate young actress in town was reading for, but no one is allowed to say anything about who the character is or what the role entails. My guess, she's another similar female spy-type character, maybe a younger rival, and the Black Widow movie will also serve as an origin story for this character so she can then turn up again in the present-day set movies as a successor. Maybe Black Widow 2.0, Spider-Woman maybe, just to keep the theme going, who has no connection to Spider-Man, by the way, despite the name. And then there's Captain America. This is the weird one, right? So at the end of the movie, they send Cap back through time again to return the borrowed Infinity Stones to where they got them from and shut down the potentially disastrous alternate realities that would create. He's supposed to pop right back up in the present again once he's done, regardless how long it takes him to do it, but instead he shows up a few yards away as a now naturally aged 90-year-old man, revealing that he decided to stay in the past once he was finished with the stones, find Agent Carter, and pick up the normal life he missed out on the first time, allowing Endgame to close on a small, sweet romantic note. That's also really confusing if you stop and think about it. Momentarily setting aside the character logic that it feels kind of weird that Captain America, of all people, would actually just hang out in the background of history, knowing not only about all the bad Marvel Universe stuff that's going to happen, like Hydra taking over S.H.I.E.L.D., Bucky being alive the whole time, etc., but also like MLK, JFK, Vietnam, Watergate, climate change, 9/11, a lot of bad stuff, and not do anything about it. According to the rules of time travel in the film, he still shouldn't be there because the timeline where he stayed and married Carter wouldn't be his original future now changed. It would be a new alternate present for him that wouldn't have the original recipe Bucky and Sam waiting to be confused by him. But there's an extra detail. He gives what looks and is implied to be the Captain America shield to Sam, but he didn't have a shield when he left. The shield was destroyed fighting Thanos. In fact, he took Mjolnir back with him in its place. So where did that come from? The only explanation I can think of that doesn't break the established time travel rules and makes sense in character is that when he went back and created the new Married to Peggy timeline, he also did different contemporary to the era superhero and or shield stuff there too, had a replacement shield, maybe probably from Howard Stark, as part of that, and then presumably after other people around him and Peggy had passed on, he traveled back to the point of his original departure like he was supposed to in the original timeline and closed the loop via, I don't know, either timeline has like a dozen super geniuses, gods, and an army of wizards who could make that happen somehow, which, I mean, to me it feels like there's enough that could use more clarification stuff baked into that to justify a whole other movie. I mean, at the very least, doesn't it feel like we should find out what happens when he took the Soul Stone back to Vormir since, you know, the Red Skull is there? And hey, since Thanos destroyed the stones in the main timeline, does he still have to stay there? Like, is the Red Skull loose again now? Except Chris Evans is supposedly done, and it makes sense or not, this does kind of seem like the right note to go out on for that character, so who knows. Anyway, this has probably gone on long enough. Thanks for watching. I'm Bob, and that's what I think for now about all those things.